Tonight, the biggest energy price shock in living memory. The cap on energy costs lifts tomorrow, sending bills soaring by £700 on average and threatening to plunge thousands into debt and poverty.
I'm just dreading the cost going up so much because it's just going to get worse and worse. It's either feed my meter or pay my rent.
Also making the headlines, cramped, dangerous and a breach of their human rights. The damning assessment of housing for asylum-seeking mothers and children in Glasgow.
In sport, the Old Firm friendly in Australia is off after Rangers withdraw from the tournament.
And the cult Scottish film Orphans transforms from a black comedy to an all-singing, all-dancing musical. I'm Vanessa Kennedy in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6.
Good evening. It's been described as the biggest energy price shock in living memory. Tomorrow, household bills will soar, intensifying the cost of living crisis. The price cap, which has kept a lid on gas and electricity bills, is being raised by more than 50%. It's because gas prices around the world have reached unprecedented highs.
The change means the average energy bill will increase by almost £700 a year. People are being urged to submit meter readings by midnight to avoid being overcharged. But the websites of many major suppliers have been down for most of the day. Courtney Cameron reports.
I live off food banks. My brother helps me top up my meter.
Mary is a working mum of 4 from Stirlingshire. She says almost every penny she earns is spent on trying to keep her house warm.
Just getting up and going to work knowing it's going to go in a meter is so difficult. Anything for £30 to £50 a day. My TV doesn't even work. No tumble dryer, no hot tub at my back garden. That's just my normal boiler.
Scottish Power discovered a problem with Mary's boiler, but she's still waiting for a replacement. She's worried about how she'll cope in the months ahead.
Just dreading the cost going up so much because it's just going to get worse and worse. I've got over £2,000 in rent arrears. It's either feed my meter or pay my rent.
Mary is just one of thousands of households across the country concerned as household budgets face their biggest challenge yet. Tomorrow, the energy price cap will increase, meaning average bills will rise by almost £700, from £1,300 to almost £2,000 a year.
It's happening because the price of wholesale gas on the global market has been really high. The prices started to increase last year as a result of economies opening up around the world after the COVID pandemic, but it's been further exacerbated by things like the war in Ukraine.
42. Jean lives on her own in Glasgow on a state pension.
Over £390 for my gas and the same for my electricity, £390 as well. That's a big jump, and I'm worrying about it, you know.
And as for students like Povilas, higher bills are an additional stress on top of studies.
Me and my flatmate got an energy bill last month that was in the region of £360, which we were not expecting. We were expecting it to be around 160 max. I need to cut back on certain luxuries and things like that, as well as certain types of foods.
The Scottish and UK governments have announced measures to ease the crisis, but for many it won't be enough. Citizens Advice Scotland says anyone who is struggling should seek advice.
So Scotland has a greater proportion of prepayment meters than the rest of Great Britain, and the people who are on prepayment meters in Scotland are also more likely to be in fuel poverty, and among certain groups that might be extreme fuel poverty, so they're spending a significant portion of their income. We're expecting that to get significantly worse.
People are being reminded to submit meter readings by midnight tonight ahead of the price jump. This is proving difficult as the websites of most suppliers crashed. The advice is to take a picture of the reading instead. Courtney Cameron, STV News.
And Scotland Tonight will have more on the energy crisis and the cost of living with a panel of experts answering your questions. That's at 8:30 this evening. A housing unit for asylum-seeking mothers and babies is so unsuitable that it's breaching their human rights. That's the damning conclusion of the Scottish Children's Commissioner in a new report laid before Parliament this week.
A visit to the complex in Glasgow found that the bedsits have no space for babies to play, crawl or stand, and that cookers and heaters were dangerously close to cots. Campaigners have compared it to a prison. The operator Mears Group has promised to take action. Kay Nicholson reports.
That's where she's sleeping, and that's where the cot is. She's drying her clothes in the room.
This is just one example of the cramped conditions of this housing block.
If the house is broken, what future does that child have?
This woman was heavily pregnant when she moved into the unit in Glasgow last year. She and her baby daughter, who is now 8 months old, live in a single room where the bed and cot are beside the basic kitchen facilities. She was so worried about speaking out that she asked us to protect her identity. What's it like living there?
My baby is starting to crawl. The house is too small. I'm frustrated. Isolation it's a big problem. We are not even part of a community at all. You want to integrate. You want to meet new people. But when you come, you get treated like this. Then you're like, what's the point? What's the point of life?
Every single mother deserves to nurture their children, and every single child has a right to be nurtured and cared for. Each time I go to the mother and baby unit, it reminds me of a prison. It embodies a detention centre. And I'm speaking from experience. I was in a detention centre.
Concerns were first raised a year ago, and provider Mears Group did say it was going to move them. But a year on, women and children are still housed in the unit. That's led to the Children's Commissioner issuing a new report today, saying the conditions there amount to a violation of human rights.
We went down at the invitation of the mothers to look at the limitations on the floor space, to look at how close the cot had to be to the cookers, which obviously raised real kind of safety issues, and to see how the environment really constrained those children's rights. We want the conclusions that we've drawn to provide support to Scottish Government and to other statutory agencies who are looking at the really welcome response to the Ukraine crisis.
Mears says it'll review the future use of the building and move the families to alternative accommodation over the next month. But campaigners fear the damage has already been done.
When you put a child in a space where there's no room to play or explore, to crawl, to stand, all of those things that you would expect a baby to do in the first couple of years of its life, it has a really detrimental effect, and that effect could be felt for years to come.
We've already got the warning signs, and the UK government are about to pass legislation that would actually make this really dreadfully the norm.
The Home Office says it's disappointed by the report and that its new plan for immigration aims to support vulnerable asylum seekers in need. Kay Nicholson, STV News, Glasgow.
The First Minister insists the Scottish Government would not repeat the mistakes made in the deal to build 2 new ferries, which are 5 years behind schedule. The row over the contract with Ferguson Marine dominated First Minister's questions.
The ferries are currently 2.5 times over budget. Opposition parties once again questioned why the original agreement was made without a refund guarantee, which would have protected public money. Our political correspondent Ewan Petrie reports.
It's more than a week since the public spending watchdog revealed the contract to build these ferries was approved by ministers without normal financial safeguards. Douglas Ross today accused the First Minister of ignoring experts and striking a catastrophic deal for taxpayers.
Nicola Sturgeon's whole claim here, even after she's lost £250 million without building a single ferry, is that the deal was the best option available. First Minister, are you seriously saying that you would sign the same deal all over again?
That was the view at the time the contract was signed. Obviously, we would not repeat what has happened. I think that is self-evident. We will learn the lessons from this. I've said several times today I deeply regret the experience of this, and I'm standing here and taking, as I did last week, full responsibility for that.
Labour said the waste of public money was not restricted to the ferry contract. In August, the turnaround director Tim Hare defended his daily rate of almost £3,000 a day, plus expenses.
My fees sit within the middle of the range of the benchmarks that the Scottish Government looked at. Inevitably, I believe it's value for money.
Anna Sarwar disagreed.
As people across Scotland tighten their belts, can the First Minister explain why she thought it was right to pay Tim Hare over £2 million, meaning he earned in just 11 days what the average Scot earns in a year?
First Minister. These decisions were taken at the time in line with proper processes and procedures, and people paying the market rates. I don't set the market rates for what people are paid.
Market rate? £3,000 a day? Were you signing Lionel Messi? I mean, who is the First Minister kidding?
Tim Hare left his position last month, but the row over these ferries shows no sign of disappearing.
Well, Ewan joins us from Port Glasgow. And Ewan, how damaging is this row for the Scottish Government?
Well, it is a real mess. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The Audit Scotland report last week has thrown up a number of fresh questions, and so far the Scottish Government is trying to hold on to this line that it takes collective responsibility for that deal going ahead, despite the advice of one of its own agencies. But until there is clarity over exactly who was involved in that decision and why it was taken, then these questions are likely to continue to dog Nicola Sturgeon and her ministers, because the bottom line is these two ferries remain here at this yard instead of servicing these island communities whose patience ran out a long time ago.
Ewan in Inverclyde, thank you. Care home residents will now have the right to see their loved ones even during a COVID outbreak under new standards announced today. More than 2 years of varied visiting rules, the changes recognise friends and family as carers.
It's the first step towards introducing Anne's Law, which would make visits a legal right. Campaigners say they're delighted that the elderly and most vulnerable will never be cut off again. Here's our political reporter, Laura Alderman.
Quick catch-ups at her care home mean the world to Alice and her daughter Sheila. Over the last 2 years, the 97-year-old has been cut off from her family and forced to isolate alone in her room numerous times due to COVID outbreaks and hospital visits.
Staff would come round and say it's locked down, and you knew that was the first you knew of it. And therefore I really felt I would never see Sheila again. I mean, it sounds a bit stupid, but when your low moments, we are discriminated against in care homes.
Last year, Alice posted this emotional plea to the Social Care Minister.
We have some on our floor who have lost part of their memory. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And they couldn't understand why we couldn't get visitors. Where were our relatives?
Sheila is part of a relatives group campaigning for Anne's Law, named after Anne Duke, who died in her care home last year after long periods of separation from her family. It would guarantee legal access to loved ones in a care home, regardless of future outbreaks. New social care standards announced today, while not law, brings those measures into effect.
I think it's a huge stepping stone to getting to Anne's Law, and I can't see us not getting to Anne's Law now. And we are also sincerely hoping that our group will be part of the public inquiry, and that this will all be documented, and that those that have lost loved ones will perhaps have a bit of reassurance to know that the ghastly situation they faced will be down on record forever, and so it won't be forgotten.
Relatives, residents and care homes are hopeful these new standards will give us a way to live with COVID in the future as well. The fact remains that if there's COVID in the community, it will end up in care homes. And at the minute, 1/3 of homes have a case of coronavirus.
I know that there have been problems, obviously, with visiting if there's been an outbreak and things like that. I think the great thing about these standards is it gives that that clarity of what's expected.
Well, now it gives the Care Inspectorate the power in terms of their duties and registration and inspection and supporting of care homes to say to care homes, you must follow this guidance. That is the big difference in all of this.
And those differences should be profound. So you'll be going for a celebration after this?
We are indeed.
Yeah, I think we will. We'll have some champagne at lunchtime, I think.
That would be lovely.
Right.
And Laura joins us now. Now, Laura, you've been following this story closely for the past 2 years. How significant are these changes today?
Well, John, over the course of the pandemic, we've heard so many heartbreaking and harrowing stories from families about the impact that these long periods of isolation and separation have had on care home residents, especially those ones with dementia. And, there has been periods of time where progress has been made. Families have got back in for visits, that contact was restored. But then just around the corner, there was a new variant of COVID or a spike in cases. And once again, those homes were locked down and families were shut out. But these new standards today, from everyone I've been speaking to, whether it's residents, relatives, care home staff, it really does feel like the most significant step forward so far, letting the family in to be carers, letting them in when there's a COVID outbreak, and just making sure that those bonds cannot be severed. Again, small changes that I think are going to have a huge impact, especially in care homes. I think this is a massive turning point for them, a sector which, as you know, has suffered so greatly during the pandemic.
Laura, thank you.
Other stories across Scotland, and STV News understands that the head of the Scottish Fire Service has been suspended amid a probe into allegations of bullying. Chief Officer Martin Blunden will now be the subject of an investigation by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Board.
An investigation into alleged inappropriate behaviour at Crieff High has found no evidence of a culture of bullying. In February, a sixth-year pupil published an open letter complaining that concerns were not being addressed. Inspectors from Perth Council found some cases of sexist and transphobic language, but concluded it was not widespread.
The average house price in Scotland has gone up 12% over the last year. It means the cost of a typical home here is now more than £178,000.
Parents in North Lanarkshire say their children are being forced into a second-class education system, with proposals to have one head teacher for the primary and secondary school in their area. They say pupils deserve a head teacher with experience of their age group. The council insists that no decision has been taken and that education of children is its top priority. Ollie Dickinson reports.
Protesting against changes to their school leadership. These parents and pupils say they want no part of North Lanarkshire Council's proposals to have one head teacher for the area's primary and secondary school.
We find that our kids are getting almost like a second-class educational experience with it. We've almost had, by default, this model in place after our primary school head teacher retired. So we've had this in place now for approximately 15 months, and we just don't feel that it's working. We don't feel that after COVID recovery our kids are getting the best experience that they should.
It's called a multi-establishment leadership model, or MELM. The council say they've identified 23 areas where it might be suitable. It would see a single head teacher take control of a secondary school and its feeder primary and early years schools. But parents here have concerns over what that means for their children.
I can't see how somebody could be an expert from 0 to 18. It's a huge range, and we need a head teacher that's focused and skilled and has the expertise to take our children forward, not to take the whole 0 to 18 curriculum forward.
Meanwhile, teaching unions say the proposals have no educational rationale.
Our view is that this is creating a layer of management which actually detracts from school leadership. And given that the whole Scottish education system is looking towards empowered schools, then this is going in the wrong direction.
North Lanarkshire Council declined our offer of an on-camera interview. They say whilst no decision has been made, the model is well established and successful in several other local authorities across Scotland. Ollie Dickinson, STV News, North Lanarkshire.
Time for the sport now, and here's Raman.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Good evening. Rangers and Celtic's controversial friendly in Australia planned for later this year is off after the Ibrox club withdrew from the tournament. Live now to Ronnie Charters, who has all of the details. Ronnie.
Yeah, Raman, 2 weeks ago it was announced that Rangers and Celtic would face off against one another for the very first time outside of Scotland in a friendly after both agreed to take part in the Sydney Super Cup. However, this afternoon, Rangers have pulled the plug. In a statement, the Ibrox club say that after it became clear the tournament organisers were unwilling to fulfil their commitments, they have terminated the club's agreement with the organisers. Now, STV understands Rangers are unhappy with a number of factors. It's believed the club were frustrated at the announcement and promotion of the fixture. As you may remember, Celtic announced this tour first, dubbing it Ange Postecoglou's homecoming. Another factor believed to be irking Rangers is the failure to fully utilise the Old Firm brand, although that term was used in ticket sales in Australia. An issue also arose over the first payment due to the Ibrox club. So Raman, a fixture that caused huge controversy when it was first announced, is now no longer going ahead.
And Ronnie, on that, it caused huge controversy because it was strongly opposed by sections of fans from both clubs, wasn't it?
It was, yes, Raman. Why? Well, to put it bluntly, both sets of supporters just see no place for an Old Firm friendly. This is one of, if not the most fierce rivals in British and world football, and the fact they're playing a friendly against one another simply was not on. We've seen protests from both sets of supporters. Rangers fans in particular have been very vocal on this matter, displaying banners. Also, as well as that, they have been disrupting recent matches. Dundee was one, throwing toilet paper and tennis balls onto the field. They were putting serious pressure on the Rangers hierarchy to pull out of this fixture, and that's what they've done. The Old Firm down under is no more.
Ronnie Ibrox, thanks very much for that. Now, Stephen Robinson admits he's looking forward to an emotional return when he takes his St team to Motherwell this weekend, but says he'll be fully focused on the clash before he catches up with old friends. Robinson spent 3 years as manager at Fir Park and was a popular figure at the club, leading them to 2 cup finals and into Europe. The Steelmen sit 8th in the table, St Mirren are 9th.
I'm looking forward to it. You know, I didn't make no secret of I love my time there. You know, I still have a very good relationship with everybody at the football club. So we're looking forward to it for 90, 96 minutes. You know, my sole focus will be on St Mirren getting 3 points and, you know, hopefully giving us a chance to look up the table.
To rugby, and Danny Wilson is calling on his Glasgow Warriors players to be ruthless in their quest for the league title. Glasgow welcomes Zebra to Scotstoun tomorrow. Wilson's side sit 4th in the table, 10 points below league leaders Leinster.
The key word for us is to become more ruthless. We've got to be able to close those games out and finish those games off on the road. That's the next step for us in our journey. We've taken some big steps forward this season. We're at home. It's a venue we've done very well at this season at Scotstoun. Last game, big game for Rob Harley. So therefore, there's a lot to play for and there's a lot to be passionate about. But the key word for us is to be ruthless.
And some golf news before I go. Scotland's Russell Knox is currently top of the leaderboard at the Texas Open. He's on 7 under par through 15 holes. They'll see you again tomorrow.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's Pizza.
Now to the weather forecast with Philip.
Today's outlook is becoming more and more unsettled. TUI Blue Hotels, sponsor STV Weather.
Well, over the next 48 hours or so, we're still holding on to this cold Arctic northerly airflow, bringing in that cold air. So it's remaining chilly as we head into the weekend. On Sunday, we'll just need to keep an eye on this warm front that's moving in from the west, so that does look set to bring with it a very wet and very windy Monday to start the new working week. Back to just now, though, and as we head through this evening and overnight to begin with, there is still 1 or 2 showers around. Those become confined mostly to coastal areas, so the Met Office have issued another yellow weather warning for ice covering most of the eastern side of the country. Further west, though, a drier night to come with clear skies. Temperatures getting down to -4 or -5 degrees Celsius, so we're likely to see a widespread frost forming. Looking ahead to tomorrow, and it will be another cold, frosty start to the day. Still 1 or 2 showers just peppering eastern areas. For a time through the morning, things do turn dry and bright. Through the afternoon, though, we've got this occluded front moving in from the northwest, and that's scooping up a lot of those showers, turning them into longer spells of rain and sleet down to sea level, snow again on higher ground, and it does look set to move south eastwards through the course of the afternoon. Looking ahead to Saturday now, and it will be drier, less cold, temperatures reaching highs of 9 or 10 degrees Celsius. Plenty of sunny spells, so it does look set to be our best day of the weekend. Bye-bye.
TUI Blue Hotels. Sponsor STV Weather.
And finally, Peter Mullen's cult film Orphans has been adapted into a brand new Scottish musical for the National Theatre of Scotland.
Ahead of its premiere tomorrow night, our entertainment reporter Laura Boyd chatted to the cast and director to find out how the gritty tale translates to an all-singing, all-dancing spectacular.
So there's a wee piece of us in there with our mother.
Dark, gripping and with some of the best one-liners around, Peter Mullen's 1998 movie Orphans has been transformed into a brand new musical directed by Cora Bissett, and tomorrow night audiences will finally get to see it on stage at Greenock's Beacon Arts Centre.
I feel like I'm about to give birth. For the longest pregnancy ever known to man. It has been a long time. It was on the slate way pre-pandemic. Finally get in the theatre where everybody gets to see all those bits of the jigsaw come together, and it's a big show. It's really emotional. It's really emotional right now, I think, for everybody.
I'm sorry, sir. I think you'll find she's too heavy.
She ain't heavy. She's my mother.
After a night re-watching Orphans, Cora messaged songwriters Tommy Riley and Roddy Hart, suggesting it had all the makings of a musical masterpiece, and the Scots duo were instantly on board.
I remember going to see it in the cinema in the late 90s when it was first released, and it was just a movie that kind of stays with you. You have the humour, you have the emotion, you have the kind of fun, extreme, silly moments. As songwriters, it's an absolute dream.
I think I might have sinned.
And it's certainly a dream come true for Orphans superfan Rab Florence, who is swapping comedy for singing and loving every moment of it.
It was during the pandemic, so I had to sing on Zoom for Roddy and Tommy and Cora, which was nerve-wracking. A lot of people do think the musical theatre isn't for them, but this is outrageous, this show.
It's definitely one for people who maybe feel a little bit intimidated by going to the theatre. I think if you love Glasgow, if you love Sweden, this is good for you.
Orphans is on tour in theatres across Scotland. I swear you won't be disappointed. Laura Boyd, STV News.
Oh, it looks fantastic. Well, that's all from us tonight.
Don't forget your cost of living questions answered in Scotland tonight at 8:30. Have a good night.
Bye for now.